It's Wednesday, and you all know what that means. It's time for another episode of Life in the Movies podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts. My name is Ryan Cam. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This week with Fast 10, and I cannot believe that we have gotten to 10, but with Fast 10 coming to theaters, I found an article, and Jacob and I are going to be reacting to little-known facts about The Fast and The Furious, the very first one. So digging into that and talking about Iron Fist Season 1, Episode 3. But first, I have to introduce my co-host, Jacob Martin, holding it down in the state of Virginia. Jacob, how you doing?
Formerly Virginia. I'm in Tennessee now.
Oh, shoot. I keep forgetting.
But other than that, doing pretty good. Still surviving in school, which I'm enjoying. I've had so many great preaching experiences, and also continuing on my YouTube channel on the side. Life has been treating me well.
That's very good to hear. This is a week after Mother's Day, but I want to wish all the mothers out there the best. I hope you all had a great day. I'm now
Your birthday was the other day, wasn't it?
Yes, I was going to say this is my first Life in the Movies episode as a 26-year-old. So happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. It was a great day. Spent a lot of time with friends, family. It was a great time. So looking forward to what my 26th year will bring. I have a goal of running a marathon because it's 26 miles. So 26, 26. I like the symmetry of that.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you. But before we dive into Iron Fist coverage, Jacob, have you watched anything good lately?
Let's see. Besides Guardians 3, which we talked about last week, I did recently watch the newest live action remake. I alluded to it, I think, last week's episode, Peter Pan and Wendy, which has a severe bashing on Rotten Tomatoes, especially on the audience score. It was so bad since Rotten Tomatoes realized most of the negative opinions were from trolls. They had to ditch the audience score on that movie. But regardless of that, I actually thought this was one of the better live action Disney remakes. It was directed by David Lowery, who also directed The Green Knight from A24, a very weird movie, but I respect it for what it set out to do. He also directed Disney's remake of Pete's Dragon. As a fan of the original, I have mixed thoughts on David Lowery's Pete's Dragon, but I don't think it's a terrible movie by any means. His version of Peter Pan, it took me a while to warm up to. There's definitely some pacing issues in the first act. There's a couple callbacks that I'm not a real big fan of between the live action and the animated film. There's a couple of decisions they make in this movie I'm personally not a fan of, especially making Tinkerbell more of a throwaway character compared to her character role in the original film. However, I actually do think there's a lot of merit to this movie. I think it's well made. It's beautifully shot. I actually do like a lot of the performances, especially Ever Anderson as Wendy, and especially Jude Law as Captain Hook. Jude Law completely chews the scenery as Captain Hook, and actually, there's a lot of intensity to the character, which I really appreciate. They actually do some really cool fleshing out of certain characters, especially Peter Pan and Captain Hook, and there's some fun swashbuckling action in there. I still think the animated Peter Pan from 1953 is still the best version of Peter Pan. That's still in my top 10 animated Disney films of all time. But considering Disney's live action track record has been so poor lately, I think Peter Pan and Wendy actually stands out among the better live action films in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Peter Pan content, I mean, they can only go up because I think the last Peter Pan anything we got was that crappy Pan movie from Joe Wright. Jeez, that movie was terrible.
Like what? Like Hugh Jackman singing Nirvana for some reason. Like, what was that all about?
Yeah, because that's what Peter Pan was missing. Blitzkrieg Bop. Like, what in the world are we doing as a society to where that is somehow like J.M. Barrie must have approved that. That movie was trash and it has been forgotten, thank God. But Yeah, I've actually heard nothing but good things about Peter Pan and Wendy. I am going to go out of my way to check it out because I am a fan of David Lowery. I thought The Green Knight was excellent. And he also directed Pete's Dragon, which is not the best, but considering the bad track record of Disney live action remakes, it is by no means, it being Pete's Dragon pronouns. It's Pete's Dragon is certainly not the worst among them. It's actually one of the better ones. So I will definitely be going out of my way to see that. Do you got anything else?
Another one I recently watched. I'm about to finally wrap up my director project on Peter Bogdanovich, and I've watched the final of his feature film that he directed. I got one documentary to watch to officially wrap it up, but the last feature film he directed was a film called She's Funny That Way, which was released in 2014, has a pretty all-star cast in this film. You got Owen Wilson, Katherine Hahn, Jennifer Aniston, Rhys Ifans is in the film, along with an actress named Imogen Poops. I'm not familiar with that actress, but she plays the main character in this movie, who starts off as a prostitute, but then she hangs out with Owen Wilson's character, who is actually a playwright, but he's actually secretly going around, even though he's married, he hooks up with other women who are at low parts of their lives and helps, gives them a bunch of money to help them actually succeed and do better. And because Owen Wilson hooked up with this girl and gave her some money, this woman is leaves her former past as a prostitute and decides to become a stage actress, unaware that the play that she's auditioning for is directed by Owen Wilson's character, who had a one night affair with her, and his wife, played by Katherine Hahn, is also a part of this stage play. So there's some crazy love triangle stuff going on. The film definitely feels like a screwball comedy in the 21st century with the fast talking dialogue and characters getting way over their heads. And there's a lot of crazy situations in there. This feels like Bogdanovich harkening back to previous comedies he directed, most notably in What's Up, Doc. I thought it was, while not a great movie, I feel like other comedies have done this trope better, and the framing of the movie is a little off. However, I do like the cast. There are a few chuckles in there, and I got a few there's a couple of good, really funny moments in this movie, and it's definitely worth a one-time watch. All the cast does wonders in this film, especially Owen Wilson and Katherine Hahn.
Yeah, Imogen Poots has actually been in quite a bit. If you look at her IMDb, she's mostly smaller parts, but she's been around quite a bit. But yeah, I've been seeing a lot of Owen Wilson lately because of my Road to Asteroid City project. I mean,
Oh yeah,
that dude is like Wes Anderson's best friend, like at this point.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
he,
It's either Owen Wilson or Bill Murray at this
or
point.
or Jason Schwartzman.
Yeah, but anyway, what have you been watching? I know you've been watching some Wes Anderson.
Yeah, so I'm actually slightly ahead. This week will be the Darjeeling Limited on the road to Asteroid City. I did watch that. I don't want to give too much away because I will have a review of it, but I wasn't crazy about it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't really love it either. I thought it was just kind of there, and I feel like there was like barely any story to this movie. It felt like Jason Schwartzman and the Wilson brothers running after trains for 90 minutes or being on a train for 90 minutes. It just, I don't know. I felt like there was just barely a story. And don't get me wrong, movies with like no real story can be good, but at the same time, I had a hard time getting invested in this one. This certainly, with Wes Anderson being kind of a very weird filmmaker, this is his weirdest in that it's very hard to place, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, I definitely understand that, having gone through Wes Anderson's filmography as well. This one wasn't one of my favorites either. I didn't hate it. I actually admired what Wes was trying to do, tell this personal story with these three brothers who struggled to get along, and they're going on this experience to bond. But like you said, there's not really much of a payoff. It's just these three guys going on this journey, and that's about it. And to me, while it's entertaining in chunks, it's not near as memorable as some of his best films.
Yeah, agreed. But my spirits were lifted when the movie I watched immediately after Darjeeling Limited was Fantastic Mr. Fox. And that movie is just gold. It's just simply gold. Every time I rewatch it, I'm reminded of how much I love it. It's got an all-star cast: George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray. Of course, they both got to be in here. Based off of the Roald Dahl book, incredible stop motion animation. It's very much a Wes Anderson movie. However, I feel like the heart of the movie is absolutely nailed. I feel like when I think of quality Wes Anderson movies, my mind immediately goes to Fantastic Mr. Fox. It looks beautiful. The score is excellent. Did I mention the animation was great? Because I'll say it again. The animation is great. It's excellent. It's funny. It's witty, but it also can be downright poetic and downright heart-wrenching at times. So yeah, Fantastic Mr. Fox is some of Wes Anderson's finest work, and it's not even close.
Well, the title says it all. Fantastic Mr. Fox is a fantastic Wes Anderson movie. It's definitely one of his top tier films, that's for sure. Definitely in my top three from the director.
Yeah, and then immediately afterwards, I stumbled onto another one of my favorite Wes Anderson movies, maybe my favorite, Moonrise Kingdom. I This was my first Wes Anderson movie, so, or well, actually my first one after Fantastic Mr. Fox. Fantastic Mr. Fox was my first, but I remember finding Moonrise Kingdom in my library and like, Wes Anderson, why does that name sound familiar? Oh yeah, he directed Fantastic Mr. Fox. I wonder if this is good. And yeah, it's just as good as Fantastic Mr. Fox. Again, loaded cast, great score from the music of Benjamin Britten. I love the two kids they got to play Sam and Susie. I thought they were both great. Again, I'll have a full review talking about it, but Moonrise Kingdom is just such a beautiful movie from all aspects.
Yeah, that's another one that's in my top three for sure. That one is such a charming watch.
Yeah, I love I noticed when we're watching the film back for this project, the kids act more like adults than the actual adults. Like if you really think about it.
I mean that is true to a certain degree because the kids, even though they make this like ridiculous pack, they do have uh some decision makings and they think all their stuff out, whereas some of the adult characters act a little like very irrationally throughout the course of the movie. And I think the paradox of that is what makes it so entertaining to watch.
Exactly. And really, like I said, the adults are so petty in that movie, but the kids, like Sam and Susie especially, like they fall in love with each other, and it's not like a puppy love. It's not like a summer fling. They meet each other and they're like, I have found my person. And it's beautiful to see.
Yeah, and what's crazy is that Moonrise Kingdom is one of my favorite love stories ever done in the movie. And it's two kids that do it. And I would rather watch Moonrise Kingdom than half the love stories starring two grown adults.
Oh yeah, any day. And shout out to Jared Gilman and Cara Hayward. They played Sam and Susie respectively. They've been in some things afterwards. They were in Patterson, which was directed by Jim Jarmusch, and Cara Hayward was also in Us, the Jordan Peele film. So they both gotten work after this, but I hope they get more stuff after this because they're both very talented and they deserve it. Well, I pass it off to all. Or wait, actually, I almost I almost forgot. I'm kind of dual wielding a couple of TV shows, kind of interchanging back and forth that I'm watching. One of them is Ozark, which is a show that I believe is wrapped up and it is on Netflix. I'm one season into Ozark, and it is a very dark show, but it's also very well written. It was essentially created by Jason Bateman, who some of you may know for his comedies like say I believe it's I Love You Man. I believe he was in that. He's mostly known as a comedic actor, but I appreciate him for his dark thrillers as well. Like if you've ever seen the movie The Gift, Jacob, Oh boy, that movie is twisted. And Jason Bateman starred in that. Joel Edgerton directed it, but he starred in it. But Jason Bateman created Ozark, and it's basically Jason Bateman plays this accountant, this financial planner, who is secretly a money launderer for the cartel. And when the scheme goes awry, he hatches a pretty much a plan that's assembled with bubblegum and scotch tape to uproot his entire family from Chicago to Missouri into the Ozark Mountains. Basically, a small bumpkin town in the middle of nowhere where he needs to launder about $8 million over a summer, which is about 3 months. And all of the internal politics that come with that, because it's not as easy as just make some cash, launder it, and send it, because he's got to deal with these families that are feuding, like the Langmores and the Snells, the FBI's involved. It's a mess, but it's a compelling watch. Jason Bateman's the main character. Laura Linney plays his wife Wendy, but their relationship is very fractured because I won't spoil it here. But they both have an interesting dynamic. It's a fantastic show. One season in anyway. Jacob, have you ever heard of this?
I think I've heard the name Ozark before, but I've never really looked into the show, nor have I actually watched it.
Like I said, it's very dark, but it's also really well written. And Jason Bateman directs most of the episodes, so it also looks really cool. And then another show that I've been watching, mostly in preparation because the new season is coming out very soon, is The Righteous Gemstones. This is from HBO. This show's basically created by David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, who created the new Halloween movies, Halloween, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. Whether you think that's a stamp of quality, I leave that up to you, the fair viewer. But let's say that for another time. This show is actually a lot better than the couple of other Halloween movies. But it basically follows the Gemstone family. They're basically like Jim and Tammy Faye Baker on steroids. They have a mega church and they're very corrupt. But the show follows them, their idiotic ways, and basically just steers them in and out of every kind of danger. It's one of those shows where you're either going to like love it because of how stupid and horrible the characters are, or you're going to hate it for that very same reason. But I love it. It's a very compelling show. John Goodman plays Eli Gemstone, the patriarch. Danny McBride plays the oldest son, Jesse. Adam Devine is the youngest son. Edie Patterson, who has been in a bunch of movies in smaller roles, but she is the lone daughter, Judy. And really, I can't really go into detail or else I'd be here all night, but basically, it's about these various harebrained schemes that they all get involved in. And like I said, it's just incredibly compelling stuff. It very much takes the idea of what we all think a megachurch is and like turns it up to like 11. It's good stuff.
Oh yeah, that one sounds kind of interesting too.
Yeah, I don't know how you would react to it, Jay, because you're actually going to college to become a preacher,
Yeah.
and I don't know.
Well, I know there's some of these churches like the Bible always talks about these false teachers who always go around and they deceive the people. So that show sounds like it's on that category.
It definitely leans in that direction, but it is incredibly interesting. But I pass that off to all of you. What are you watching lately? Let us know in the comments. Love to read what you have to say. All right, Jacob. Well, let's dive into Iron Fist. Iron Fist season 1, episode 3, and I think that we were talking about before we started recording. This episode was a bit of an improvement, but not by much. The episode, and I love the title of this episode, is called Rolling Thunder Cannon Punch. I love that title so much. Joy proves herself a shrewd business person. Danny recalls a painful memory, and Colleen puts her talents to good use. I think the biggest takeaway from this, we have development on the Hand. The Hand is now making its presence known, and we got a Hogarth sighting. Carrie Ann Moss is in this show now, which I actually thought was very nice to see. But overall, it's an improvement again, but still, this show is kind of like I don't know how to feel about it, Jacob. What say you?
Yeah, I'm still not a fan of Iron Fist. Then what's sad is the episode titles are better than the actual episodes themselves. Like you hear the title, I'm like, oh, that's gonna be a cool episode. But then I watch the episode and it's kind of boring. The characters are all unlikable. I don't even Iron Fist, Danny, he just seems unreasonable in this episode. Like you have like his longtime friend, his former friend, the girl Joyce, go up to him and make what I think is a fair and reasonable deal, right? Even if it means changing his name, even though people think he's dead anyway. I'll be like, whatever. But he's like, no, you can't make me do this. I gotta have my money. And the funny thing is, later on in the episode, he's like, I don't care about the money. I just want to keep my name. And so he keeps like flipping sides back and forth and acting like a hypocrite and all this. And he just comes off as like an unlikable jerk bag in this episode to me. Like it was hard rooting for him. And then he turns to the Hogarth character, Carrie Ann Moss, who to me was a kind of a weird flex because we've seen her in previous shows, especially Jessica Jones, and she's definitely not the perfect person either. And so I was kind of confused on who am I supposed to be rooting for in this show. The only character, and even Colleen, for example, like she criticized that one student for doing these underground fights, but what does she do at the end of the episode? She goes into an underground fight that gets some extra money to help the dojo. So who am I supposed to be? Who am I
Hypocrisy.
supposed?
Hypocrisy. Thy name is Wing.
Who am I supposed to be rooting for in this show?
I don't know.
Nobody.
I don't think even the showrunners really know. And I said out loud when like a moment happens when Danny is offered $100 million to change his name and walk away. I'm like, dude, take it. Like I would have taken it. Like, find me a pen. Where do I sign? I'm like, this dude's sitting there like taking the noble way out, and I'm just sitting there like the great philosopher Ron White once said, "You can't fix stupid."
Yeah, exactly. And like people change their names all the time too. So he's like making such a big deal out of nothing.
Yeah, I mean, change your name, take the money, and start your own company to go up against the Meachums. But no, he has to be like, my name is important. I'm like, no, you're dead technically, so it's not really that important. It's
Yeah, like the writing in this show. And there's good. The sad thing is, there's good ideas in this show. When there's action, the action is very well choreographed, but the writing and the dialogue around what's set up is terrible, and it's hard really getting invested in this show.
yeah, it's just it. I don't know what to make of this. It is like the pieces of this puzzle are on the table, and I would say they're just not arranged properly, but I feel like there are several pieces missing. And they've like fallen under the couch and into the planter. And I'm just like, I don't know if the writers have any interest in actually fixing the puzzle. So I
So
don't.
what the big question I have is what's actually going on with the again, I forget the character's name. The same actor who played Faramir in Lord of the Rings. I'm just gonna call him Faramir because I don't care about his actual name. What's his deal? Like we find out, like obviously, his two children are running the business. Wesley, I think's the guy's name. No, Ward. I don't know why I got Wesley from. Ward knows that his dad is still alive, chilling somewhere. His sister doesn't know that until going on. Well, he died somehow, but somehow he's not dead, and he's just hiding in a penthouse somewhere, just chilling and overseeing everything and chastising his son. Like, what's his deal? I'm so confused on his story.
Yeah, I mean, we see Madame Gao in the shadows in this. I'm like, I would almost prefer the villain to be her. It was like she secretly like bought out the company and is like using Ward as like her puppet. I would have honestly preferred that.
I was confused over that too. Like, is Madame Gao that we see in the shadows? Is she the hand? Like, who's the hand?
I want to say she's a part of the hand. It's I don't know. It's never properly explained, I think.
It's, yeah, this is a very, very, very confusing show to me. Like, I want to like it. That's the thing. The pieces are there, but it's not coming together.
Yeah, it's sad to see because I think Finn Jones is capable of putting in a good performance, and I do like Carrie Ann Moss, and I like seeing her in this, but I don't know. The movie just had not the movie, but the show just has go away heat, and we're only 3 episodes in.
Yeah, and this is one of them 13 episode
Yeah, we are
seasons.
a third
I
way.
wish this went to Disney Plus model and it was 6 episodes. Get it out of my misery.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we're not that lucky. But I pass it off to all of you. What did you think of Iron Fist season 1, episode 3? Comment down below. Love to read what you have to say. All right, Jacob. Well, it is main event time. This coming week, coming to theaters, Fast and the Furious 10, because because bad ideas never truly die. And let me just get out there and say, if I sound harsh, just know that for like many years I loved this series. Like Fast and the Furious, Too Fast and Too Furious, and Tokyo Drift. I unironically love all 3 of those movies. I understand Too Fast, Too Furious is not great, but it is insanely watchable, if for nothing else because of the power of Tyrese. But I feel like and then 5 and 6 and 7 were fun, but the series has just not only jumped the shark, but has done 630s, 720s, and 980s over the shark. I feel like logic has just left the series, like it has been exorcised out of the corpse of this franchise, and in its place is just being propped up Weekend at Bernie's style. I don't know. I'm just sick of these movies at this point.
Yeah, and I kind of am in a similar ballpark as you. Like, there was a point where I enjoyed the absurdity of the Fast and Furious movies. Like 5 through 8, I thought were highly enjoyable movies. Hobbs and Shaw was a ridiculous spinoff that knew what kind of movie it was. But then, like, 9 took it way too far to where it felt like a parody of itself. And at this point, I don't even care about seeing 10 and 11 and possibly 12, which Vin Diesel just seemingly announced. Like, will these
Oh,
movies ever die?
like death, taxes, and the Fast and the Furious. Those are the only inevitables in life. But I found this article online and I thought it would be fun to react to it. This is the Fast and the Furious's 20th anniversary, 20 things you didn't know about the film. And this was published in March of last year on Screen Rant. And I'll post a link to the article in the description if you'd like to go read it for yourself. But Jacob, I'm going to fire these off rapid style if you are ready.
I'm ready.
Right, let's go. So starting off with number 1, the movie began as an article. It's interesting to see the origins of popular movies, and The Fast and the Furious had a surprising one. In the movie's director commentary, director Rob Cohen explained that he was first given an article on street racing and asked about making a movie of it. And it would go on to say he didn't really see all that much in it, but then when he went to an illegal street racing event, he fell in love with it so much, it was like, okay, I think I can work with this. And we ended up getting that. So, in the words of T.E. Lawrence from Lawrence of Arabia, big things have small beginnings, I guess.
Yeah, it's there's always an interesting story about how people come up with the making of a movie, and I think some people had to be in the right place at the right time. And I think for Rob Cohen, he just had to see a race for himself, and he's like, "I got this."
Yeah, well, number 2, the title was taken, meaning that the Fast and the Furious was actually, there is another Fast and the Furious out there. While the franchise has come up with all sorts of creative and silly ways to rework the title for the many sequels, the Fast and the Furious remains a pretty ideal title for the first installment. However, when the movie was getting underway, it was discovered that the title was owned by a B movie from 1955. And Rob Cohen had to go to the producer, Roger Corman, to basically buy the rights to the title. And if you all have no idea who Roger Corman is, basically he was like the B movie producer of like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He gave a lot of directors their start, including Francis Ford Coppola, whatever happened to him. But he also produced he produced some good stuff like House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price, but he also produced a lot of junk as well. Like he was producing like 2 or 3 movies a year back in the 50s and 60s. So infinitely fascinating guy there, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what the Roger Corman Fast and Furious was. That just sounds. It's probably going to be bad, but probably still watchable than whatever Fast 10 is going to be. Oh, you're on mute.
Yep, I muted myself again. Well, reading the synopsis off of IMDb, a trucker framed for murder breaks out of jail, takes a young woman hostage, and enters her sports car in a cross-border road race, hoping to get to Mexico before the police catch him. So, honestly, that kind of sounds like you put Vin Diesel in it, and that sounds like a Fast and Furious movie right there.
Yeah.
Kind of eerily similar there. Well, at number 3, producers wanted Timothy Olyphant to play Dom. Vin Diesel began his rise as a Hollywood star thanks largely to Dom Toretto in The Fast and Furious. He made the role into an iconic one. However, producers initially wanted Timothy Olyphant to take the role, but Olyphant passed. Now, Timothy Olyphant has gone on to do some pretty solid things. He was in Justified, the FX show. He was in The Mandalorian fairly recently. So Timothy Olyphant did pretty good for himself and still continues to do so. But I honestly can't see anyone else but Vin Diesel playing Dom at this point. But maybe it's just from the only person I've ever seen of Dom is like literally Vin Diesel. But it's just weird.
Yeah, you think of iconic characters in movie history, and you read these stories of actors who almost had the chance to play these characters, but after seeing the person they do cast, you're like, I cannot see any of these actors playing these characters. It's like I like Timothy Olyphant; he's a good actor, but the only actor, as much as how big of an ego Vin Diesel has, the only person I could see ever playing that character is Vin Diesel. Like I associate Vin Diesel with Dom Toretto and the Fast and Furious franchise.
Yeah, in another universe, Timothy Olyphant is the guy saying, I asked you to give me a 10-second car, not a 10-minute car.
Yeah,
And
that's
him saying all those family memes, but let's save that for another time. Next up, number 4. Some interesting actors were considered for Brian O'Connor. Rest in peace, Paul Walker, by the way. Some names considered for the role included Christian Bale, Mark Wahlberg, and brace yourself, Eminem, like Marshall Mathers. Um, I mean, I think at least the music would have been nice, but I just can't.
What? My name is what? My name is what? My name is
Brian
Ryan. What? My name is.
O'Connor. Oh man.
Oh.
Hi kids, do you like violence? Yeah, yeah.
In an alternate world, Lose Yourself wouldn't be the theme song to 8 Mile. It would have been the theme song to the first Fast and Furious movie.
I mean, I it might have fit. Who knows?
I don't
But,
know.
but
But
Christian Bale and Mark Wahlberg are interesting choices because keep in mind the movie came out in 2001. 4 years after this, Christian Bale was in a movie you may have heard of called Batman Begins. So it's not too far out of bounds. And then Mark Wahlberg's career was also on the rise. So again, not too far out of bounds, but at the same time, I mean, similar to Vin Diesel, you can't envision anyone else but Paul Walker playing this role. Again, rest in peace.
I feel like with Brian, like I think if they had cast Christian Bale or Mark Wahlberg, I think I could have those actors I think would have been interesting playing that character. But at the end of the day, I'm glad they gave it to Paul Walker because Paul Walker was the heart of the Fast and Furious franchise, and I feel like that's why the later movies didn't work as well for me, because after Paul Walker died, a piece of the franchise died with him, which was the heart.
Yeah, exactly. And is like it's unfortunate that he is indeed no longer with us, though. I guess that's the main takeaway. Well, next up, the romance between Dom and Letty was not in the original script, and Rob Cohen would later say in the commentary that he basically put it in there to give Michelle Rodriguez more to do, which is funny considering the fact that the Letty and Dom romance is technically still ongoing all the way up into number 10. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I wonder if he realized the talent of Michelle Rodriguez on display. And so it's like, okay, we'll add this in so we can give your character more to do. Maybe you can take part in some of the action. You can be the love interest to the main character, but you can also still be awesome and kicking butt and do some street racing.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that Rob Cohen didn't stick with the franchise very long. So you think maybe like Justin Lin or Louis Lederer could have introduced that. Who really knows?
Yeah. Yeah, because Rob Cohen, if you look up his filmography, he does have a kind of an interesting track record, because I know he also directed the first Triple X, also with Vin Diesel, and he also directed the Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, which is easily the weakest of the three Mummy movies with Brendan Fraser, despite having some decent action set pieces in there. Uh, I don't think his career really took off as well compared to, especially Justin Lin, who directed most of the films in the Fast and Furious franchise. But hey, I guess you had to start the franchise somewhere, and Rob Cohen was probably the best guy to do it.
Yeah, and one note on Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. I feel like everyone hates that movie except for me. I unironically really like that movie. It's not perfect, but I think it's fun. So I ought to do
Yeah,
it better. I ought to do it better than you remember on that movie.
yeah, yeah. The recasting of Evie takes me out of the movie. That's one of the reasons.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Well, next up on here, some of the cast couldn't drive, specifically Jordana Brewster and Michelle Rodriguez. They later admitted in interviews that they didn't get their driver's license until they got cast for their roles. That would have been kind of awkward. Like, yeah, hi, you cast me in this movie about driving. Yeah, I'm not technically licensed to drive. I'm like, I figured that would have been a prerequisite or something.
Yeah. Well, at the same time, maybe they're like, okay, we see the talent. Thank you for your honesty. How about we give you driving lessons? I don't know if they paid for their driving class, but if they did, then I guess props to them for doing that. Hey, how about this? How about you drive? I'll cover it. I want you to be a good vital part of this movie.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, next up on the list, Ja Rule's role barely existed at first. And to be quite honest, I forget he's even in that movie, to be completely honest.
Yeah, me too. Like, you think of the Fast and Furious movies now, and you have Ludacris in a lot of the Fast and Furious movies, who's also a rapper on the side. But Ja Rule was like really big in what, 2001, 2002, around the time the first movie came out. It would have been interesting if he was the mainstay in the franchise and not Ludacris.
Yeah, it's kind of like in Bullet Train, that movie we got last year. Bad Bunny is just randomly in the movie, and Bad Bunny's like the top hip hop artist in the world right now. He's just randomly in there, no fanfare or anything of the sort. Like, oh, there's Bad Bunny. I'm like, oh, hello, Mr. Bunny. How are you doing today? But next up, the movie was heavily inspired by Westerns, which makes too much sense to me. Another detail Cohen discussed in the commentary was how so much of the movie was modeled after Westerns. He claimed that he saw Dom as the fastest gun in the West character. He also admitted that the opening truck heist sequence was inspired by Stagecoach, one of John Wayne's most acclaimed films. And quite honestly, there's a scene near the end where Dom and his team rob the truck and the dude has a shotgun, and he shoots at them. That's ripped straight out of a Western right there.
Yeah, when you bring up the Western comparison, when you talk about them, going after the stuff in the truck, which, By the way, it's just so funny to me. You go back and watch the first movie, and they're stealing these high tech items, which were VCRs. They were stealing VCRs in the first
DVD
movie and
players.
DVD players, which
That
is
was
so funny to think about in 2023.
that was
But
high end in 2001, apparently.
they, but they steal these very high tech items. But after you make the Western comparison, it does feel like the old Westerns where they're trying to rob the stagecoach or rob the train or whatever. Sometimes that works, and then the first movie they make the big heist in the end, and it kind of backfires on them. There's a lot of crazy stunt work, and people get shot, and I say Brian exposes that he's a cop to save Dom.
Yeah, and not to mention, most of the stunt work from what I see of it is practical, which just impresses me to no end. But next up, the speeding scenes were inspired by Star Wars. While the crime aspect what may have been taken by Westerns, Cohen admitted on the commentary track that he had a more specific inspiration for the racing sequences. He talked about wanting to add a science fiction element to these scenes. Oh, that would be much later in the franchise, Rob, trust me. Particularly when the drivers initiate the NOS and go into high speeds. He modeled these moments off of the light speed sequences from Star Wars. And honestly, that's another thing that makes a lot of sense to me too. Just from the moment where they press the button, is like, and you see the NOS go into the engine and you see him take off, and like, yeah, that's very heavily inspired.
Yeah, I can see that too now that you've mentioned it.
Yeah, well, next up, and I think this is probably one thing that I always like knew about the movie, the similarities to Point Break. After
Mhm.
so much time, fans may forget that the original plot of the movie revolved around Brian O'Connor as an undercover cop infiltrating Dom's crew and being accepted. In the commentary, Cohen acknowledges that the plot shares a striking similarity to Point Break, as well as the crime movie Donnie Brasco, but he simply praised both movies and insisted that it was good to be inspired by the best. So again, fair enough, but shout out to Point Break and Donnie Brasco. They're both very good movies.
Yeah. I can't comment on Donnie Brasco because I've never seen it, but I've seen Point Break. And if you watch the two movies back to back, you can definitely see the similarities in the plot and the characters, especially with uh, Brian and Dom Toretto compared to Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves characters in Point Break. And they both have the heist elements. Both with one character who's undercover. There's an illegal heist going on, and they're using sports as their cover, surfing in the Point Break, street racing in Fast and Furious, and they have similar endings too. If you think about it, where uh, the main character who does all the heists does his one last thing, kind of rides off into the sunset almost.
Yeah, sorta, and of course, Dom, we later learn lives at the end, but at the time we didn't know about that because I remember a time where Dom coming back to the franchise was a revolutionary thing because Vin Diesel left. Let's not forget. He wasn't in Too Fast, Too Furious, and he wasn't even in Tokyo Drift. It wasn't until the ending of Tokyo Drift that he came back, and then Fast and Furious, the fourth one, was where he made his proper return. But at the time, it was like, oh, this is his swan song. Oh, how little we knew. But next up, the reasoning for the undercover plot. And then Cohen also acknowledged that some questioned if the storyline with O'Connor infiltrating the gang was necessary. However, Cohen was like, we need something to propel the movie. So it like the whole DVD thing, that almost was cut out of the movie entirely. Good move to keep it in. That's what I say.
Yeah, the I think without the Brian O'Connor storyline, the film would have been kind of shallow. It would be enjoyable, but I think you'd forget about it. It'd just be cool racing sequences, no more, no less. I think adding the Paul Walker storyline, like I said earlier, gave the movie some heart and set up a really close bond between Brian and Dom, where later on in the franchise, they become more like brothers than anything else, which is really compelling to watch.
Yeah, without a doubt. Next up is the editing style being purposely fast throughout. While the heist, well, while the heist, while the racing scenes and high-speed heist sequences are obviously the biggest draws, Cohen wanted to ensure the rest of the movie was as gripping as possible. In the commentary, he spoke about wanting the camera to always be in motion and wanting to have a fast editing style so even the scenes of dialogue and exposition felt like a race. And I think that was a good move because, again, I don't think this movie's the best of the series, but I'm never bored by it. There's always something going on. There's always constant motion. There's always something potentially interesting happening. I like that. I like the spirit of that.
Yeah, it does feel like it was made in the year it was made, though, with the hyper fast editing and stuff. It feels like a 2001 movie, for better or for worse.
Oh, that's for sure. You could definitely tell when something like a blockbuster came out in like 99, 2000, 2001. There's definitely a certain style to it. And if you know, you know. Well, next up, the production painted local houses. In the commentary, Cohen talked about wanting to make the world of the cars and the racing stand out as truly something special. Cohen said that they asked local houses that would appear in the shots with cars if they could paint them more muted colors so that the colorful cars would stand out more. And you could definitely see that being somewhat effective. I mean, Brian's car we see is like bright green at first, but then you see him like at a bright orange, and then Dom's car was like a darker shade of red. So I think, and then even in the motorcycles that we see with Johnny Tran and his gang, with them being like red and green and all that. So the color contrast, it definitely stood out as like, yep, these are definitely the speed racers of the movie.
Yeah, some of those like smaller details I don't really notice unless somebody brings it up. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, without a doubt. And moving on to the next one, the torture scene was scaled back. See, people forget this movie's actually is that movie's actually got some pretty dark moments. And one of the darker moments was when Johnny Tran and his gang, they take this poor guy into this garage and like nearly like drown him with oil. Like it's dark stuff. And according to this, Cohen pointed out in the commentary that the torture scene in which a man is doused with motor oil was forced to be trimmed down. Cohen explained how important he thought it was that a younger audience be allowed to see the movie and therefore accepted when the MPAA asked to make the scene less intense. So we can only sit and think like how much worse it could have gotten, but I don't know, it freaked me out when I first saw it. I thought it was effective, so maybe Cohen was onto something.
Hmm. Yeah, you always hear stories about these scenes being more violent than they are, and then they're being asked to cut it down so they can keep the intended rating it was going for. I never really thought much of the torture scene when I saw it. I kind of forgot about it until you brought it up because it's not really like my favorite movie in the franchise. But looking back, I think the earlier Fast and Furious movies, when it was all about the street racing, like 1 through 4, I think a lot of them did have like intense torture scenes. I think Tokyo Drift had some as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Han dies
Yeah,
because that was
definitely.
freaking retcon.
That one I remember, and I hate that they retcon that in 9.
See, that's why I love Tokyo Drift so much because that feels like things mattered in that movie more. But again, that's a whole nother conversation for another time. Well, next up, the fight between Brian and Vince was improvised. Their rivalry starts very early in one of the first scenes of the movie, them getting in a brawl. Cohen explained in the commentary that the entire fight was initially choreographed beforehand, but the two actors felt it was unnatural, so they decided in the moment to improvise a scrappier fight. And yep, it definitely felt improvised because it felt like there was just a lot of choking involved from like the looks of it.
Oh, which fight was this again?
This was like the first fight where like Brian's leaving the shop and he's like, yeah, don't come back. And like Vince says, and Brian's like, I like the tuna here. And Vince is like, BS, no one likes the tuna here. And then they fight in the street.
Okay, I think I remember that now. Like I said, it's been a while since I've seen the first movie.
Yeah, well, next up, Rick Yun, who plays Johnny Tran, had issues with getting beaten up. As to be expected, the character serves as a rival to Dom, and the two come to blows eventually at the desert sequence. In the commentary, Cohen explained that Yun was uncomfortable with his character getting knocked down so easily by Dom, as he wanted to put up more of the fight. However, Cohen reasoned that a punch from Vin Diesel would not be easy to walk away from. I mean, it's got a point there, and I feel like what we ended up getting was fine. It would have been interesting to see if like a whole full blown like Dom Johnny Tran fight if it eventually came down to that.
Yeah, that's a character that was only in the first movie too. So I think
Yeah,
the film was, I
we
think,
never
trying to
hear from
show,
him. We never hear from him again.
yeah, there's this rivalry, but there's also, I guess, at the end of the day, I guess, respect between the two, which is why he never beat up on him.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, one of the more famous lines, one of the more famous lines in Fast and Furious is "I live my life a quarter mile at a time." Well, according to the article, the guy who wrote it was not Rob Cohen. It was David Ayer, like the
Mhm.
guy who would do the crap Suicide Squad and would do End of Watch, which I think that movie's awesome. So, yeah, David Ayer, thank you for that. That was one of the best lines in the entire franchise.
Yeah, I'm not that big a David Ayer fan, but hey, that's a good line.
Yeah, I believe if my memory serves, David Ayer actually wrote some of the screenplay for this, which makes total sense. David Ayer, with the exception of Suicide Squad, really makes like these smaller, grittier, like street level kind of movies. So that makes total sense to me. Well, next up is it's just called Dom's Karmic Justice. While Cohen wanted fans to have a connection to Dom and see him as sympathetic, he explained in the commentary that he felt he needed to face some sort of punishment. He felt as though Dom's arc was building toward some karmic justice being paid, and that came with the final truck heist sequence. Cohen even avoided making the truck driver a distinguishable character, as he wanted the truck to seem like a monster of karma. That's interesting because it definitely speaks to that because the truck driver is just like a generic truck driver, and really the only thing that we know about him is like he has like a shotgun and really takes out the crew for good, but we don't really see him again. So I feel like that was a good call.
Yeah, although, do you think because they keep making these retcons in the Fast and Furious movies, like Jason Momoa in Fast 10 is related to the villain in Fast 5? Will will the generic truck driver, be the main mastermind villain in the final Fast 12 movie? Like, I was the mastermind the whole time.
It was me, Toretto. It was me the whole time.
That's
Well, we only have a couple more left. So next up is talk about the stunt work of the final heist. Cohen was sure to express that while all the actors were doing a lot of their own stunts, there was never a point where they were put in any danger. Well, that's a good thing because, man, there was certain times where I was like, man, there must have been injuries, but apparently not. Cohen expressed that he felt that a level of safety be maintained is the art of action filmmaking. He also pointed out that the actor Matt Schultz, who plays Vince, was actually strapped to the front of the truck for the sequence and made an honorary stuntman at the end of the shoot. I would hope so, because man, that dude went through it in that sequence.
yeah, it's good to know. Like, stunt work is very dangerous in the business, and especially in these Fast and Furious movies where they do some crazy stunts. Yeah, you got to keep everybody safe. So, major props for as much as I have a love hate relationship with this franchise. Yeah, you got to keep your stunt crew safe at all costs.
Oh, without a doubt. And last on this article, multiple endings were shot. So Cohen in the commentary basically said that while multiple endings were filmed, he was satisfied with the one that we got, with Dom escaping. But that's interesting. The article doesn't really say what the other endings could have been, but you got to think that among them would have been something like, say, for example, like Dom ends up getting arrested and sent to jail, or Brian O'Connor like loses his badge as a result of it, or I don't know. It's interesting to think about, but I guess we'll never know.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, there's actually a post-credit scene at the end of the first movie where you see Dom Toretto driving his car, and he ended up in Mexico.
Which would make sense considering that's the next time we see him in Fast and Furious. So
Yeah,
nice little bit of continuity there in a series that farts in the general direction of continuity. But
yeah.
but yeah, that was a very interesting article, and it really just speaks to how far this franchise has come and how crazy and loon bag it has all become. But but I pull it off to you. What is your favorite Fast and Furious moment? What's your favorite Fast and Furious movie? Let us know in the comments. Love to read what you have to say. Well, Jacob, thank you so much as always. This was always so much fun to do with you every week. One more programming note before we close things out. I'll be going onto your channel this coming Thursday, May the 18th, for the latest Discussing DreamWorks. It's going to be about Madagascar, and I have not seen that movie in a very long time. So it's going to be really interesting to go back and revisit that. But other than Discussing DreamWorks, what else you got?
Um, this past Saturday, I did my newest What I've Watched live stream where I reviewed a bunch of movies I've watched in the previous weeks. And so, what I usually do after I do a live stream, especially now that I'm at school, I will take what I've done on the live stream, edit them down, and re upload them as standalone reviews. This video is this episode is dropping on a Wednesday. I should have a video up for Guardians of the Galaxy 2, a re-review of that, and hopefully a review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 should be up on the channel at sometime at this point as well. And then I also plan on doing a review this week for Peter Pan and Wendy, which I just recently watched. That's what I've got this week. And as Ryan said, be on the lookout for our Discussing DreamWorks, which will premiere live on my channel tomorrow night, Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And of course, you can also follow me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yeah, definitely give Jacob a subscribe there. It's a good time. And as for this channel, on Friday I will be dropping the latest in the Road to Asteroid City by talking about the Darjeeling Limited, and then on Sunday it'll be the final destination of my road to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse with Mike Thomas from the Novice Cinephile. So stay tuned for all of that. But if you like the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, click the bell to allow notifications, so when a new video drops, you'll be the first to know about it. For Jacob Martin, my name is Ryan Cam. We'll see you in the next one. You take care.